Good evening. Facebook likes to say it was built to bring people together. It literally uses those words in promotional material. Well, today it did bring people together. For the first time in a long time, Democratic and Republican members of a Senate Commerce Subcommittee were together, united in their praise of whistleblower Frances Haugen. Now, as you know, she's the former Facebook product manager who leaked tens of thousands of pages of internal documents indicating that Facebook knows the harm that they and Instagram can do, but chooses to put clicks, eyeballs, and ad sales ahead of fixing the problem.
The company's leadership knows how to make Facebook and Instagram safer, but won't make the necessary changes because they have put their astronomical profits before people. The documents I have provided to Congress prove that Facebook has repeatedly misled the public about what its own research reveals about the safety of children, the efficacy of its artificial intelligence systems, and its role in spreading divisive and extreme messages.
Well, as you'd imagine, this is not the company's public position. Listen to what CEO Mark Zuckerberg told lawmakers just last March.
The research that we've seen is that using social apps to connect with other people can have positive mental health benefits and well-being benefits, like helping people feel more connected and less lonely.
Mark Zuckerberg talking about the research that he's seen. Now, Frances Haugen on research we do not know whether he's actually seen, but he was certainly privy to because it was done by the company itself, his company.
Facebook's own research about Instagram contains quotes from kids saying, "I feel bad when I use Instagram, but I also feel like I can't stop." Right? I know that the more time I spend on this, the worse I feel, but like I just can't, like that they want the next click, they want the next like.
And in general, so do Instagram and Facebook because that increases engagement, which in turn helps advertising revenue. That much is a simple fact about the way that social networks operate. The fundamental question is, does Facebook build their algorithm knowing it harms certain users? Frances Haugen says the answer is very simply yes.
Has Facebook ever offered features that it knew had a negative effect on children's and teens' mental health?
Facebook knows that its amplification algorithms, things like engagement-based ranking on Instagram, can lead children from very innocuous topics like healthy recipes. I think all of us could eat a little more healthy, all the way from just something innocent like healthy recipes to anorexia promoting content over a very short period of time.
Today's hearing focused heavily on Facebook and Instagram's impact on kids. It also dealt with Facebook's role in amplifying election lies, political violence, and everything else surrounding the 2020 election and attack on the Capitol. Now, before we play you some of that testimony, though, here's what Facebook's Vice President for Content Policy said on CNN earlier today.
The responsibility for January 6th lies with those who broke the law and those in politics and elsewhere who incited them. And the work that we did both before the election and all the way through January 6th, partnering with academics and researchers, working closely with law enforcement and electoral authorities to understand what the risks were and to put safety measures in place that started before the election, well before the election, and continued through March. That was work that I'm very proud to have been a part of. I've frankly never seen such an effort to prepare for an election.
Now, those safety measures were aimed at limiting the spread of falsehoods, misinformation, and incitement. And as you heard Ms. Haugen say on the program last night, they did not work very well. In any case, the safeguards were lifted immediately after the election, and restrictions on the so-called Stop the Steal movement weren't imposed until after the Capitol attack. Now, today, Ms. Haugen had this to say about why, in her judgment, the company did not maintain those safeguards longer.
The choices that were happening on the platform were really about how reactive and twitchy was the platform, right? Like how viral was the platform. And Facebook changed those safety defaults in the run-up to the election because they knew they were dangerous. And because they wanted that growth back, they wanted the acceleration of the platform back after the election, they returned to their original defaults. And the fact that they had to break the glass on January 6th and turn them back on, I think that's deeply problematic.
So did the lawmakers questioning Ms. Haugen? The company in recent days has pointed to a research project it set up with an outside panel of experts to study the platform's effect on the election. However, the company's own press release on it openly suggests it doesn't consider itself bound by any recommendations that should come from it. And as for how the company treats its own internal research, Just last week, it published 2 of the internal studies, which were cited today, on the harmful mental health impact Instagram has on teen girls. Notably, though, it came with Facebook's own added annotations rebutting or reframing some of the negative points. Not the picture of a company ready or willing to take a hard look at itself, at least not in public. As for inside corporate walls, well, Frances Haugen spoke to that as well today.
I think in general, but I'd like you to just confirm for me, this research and the documents containing that research is not only findings and conclusions, it's also recommendations for changes. What I hear you saying is that again and again and again, these recommendations were just rejected or disregarded, correct?
There is a pattern of behavior that I saw at Facebook, of Facebook choosing to prioritize its profits over people. And any time that Facebook faced even tiny hits to growth, like 0.1% of sessions, 1% of views, that it chose its profits over safety.
Well, joining us now is Yael Eisenstadt, former elections integrity head at Facebook, former CIA officer and former White House advisor. Also, Jennifer Greigel, associate professor of communications at Syracuse University, who studies the harmful effects of social media on teens. Yael, you've been speaking out about what you say are the dangers of Facebook since you left the company. How big of a watershed moment you think was today, given the focus is now on the company's own documents?
Well, thanks for having me on, Anderson. I think it is a huge watershed moment, but only if we actually do something with the information. You know, everything that's in the documents, especially the documents that were turned over to the SEC, which have now been released, I think, only today publicly, they just demonstrate the internal knowledge of what Facebook does and doesn't know about exactly what's happening on their platform. Then it confirms what a lot of researchers, activists, former employees such as myself have been saying for years. And so, again, it's up to lawmakers now. It's not about whether Facebook is good or bad or does more good than bad. It's about whether or not there are some practices that have harmed democracy, harmed individuals, and potentially broken the law, and what the leadership knew about it. This should absolutely be a huge watershed moment and should really make the public understand that at this point, we can no longer just rely on Facebook's own self-selected data points and their own talking points when they like to say have and haven't done.
Jennifer, I mean, a lot of people have made the analogy to big tobacco purposely misleading the public about the dangers of smoking, and when that was revealed, do you think this is as bad as that?
It's very different. Over time, you know, it may take several years for a cancer to manifest, but what we're seeing on Instagram is an imminent threat to teenagers. I am seeing self-harm, and that sounds so abstract when the senators are talking about it, but what does that look like? I'm talking about starvation. That has how bad the anorexia photos are up there. I'm talking about teenagers cutting themselves. This context needs to be out there so that parents understand what this looks like. And it's not simply just like smoking a cigarette. Sure, the regulation down the road, maybe we have to manage it that way, but I think we need that context right now.
Yeah, as a former CIA officer, you've said in an interview that Facebook knows you better than the CIA ever will, which is, I mean, it's a fascinating thing, a fascinating quote. You said Facebook knows more about you than you know about yourself. That is the remarkable thing, and Yuval Noah Harari has written about this in his book Homo Deus, that we forget about ourselves. We forget. I mean, my mind is like a sieve. I forget things I did, 10 years ago or last week. Facebook remembers, and it's all there. They know more. They know about everybody who is a customer of theirs.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it really is actually true. And this is what I think people need to really understand. It's not about, again, it's not about Facebook purposely or intentionally saying, we want to go harm teenage girls, or we want to radicalize people. I mean, the most shocking revelation to me was the whole idea of how algorithms were recommending extremist groups, which is the core of what I used to work on and what I talked about. But how do they do that? They do that because they hoover up all of your data around the internet, not just when you're using Facebook. And they segment you into these profiles to sell you, basically, they're not selling your data, but they're selling a profile of you through targeting tools to advertisers. And in order to do that, they have to keep hoovering up our data. And so then they start to infer not just exactly who you are, what photo you posted today, but what's going to really kind of play to your vulnerabilities and what message is going to keep you coming back for more. And that's why I say they know more about you than you do yourself.